Middle School Embassy, hello. Welcome to another YouTube premiere party. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm at my house, all right? I was inspired by Jake last week to be casual and in my house. So here's the thing about being in my house. I have a daughter, and I have a wife, and I have a cat, who you actually maybe have just seen like sneaking this way. And so, with being in my house, there may or may not be some distractions along the way. So if I happen to be like, and look off, or be like, what's that? I would love to know how many of you just looked behind you, by the way. But if I seem a little bit distracted or anything, it's because like there are things going on. But that's part of being at home, right? So welcome to my house, and welcome to another week of YouTube Premiere. I am glad that you're here with us tonight. Obviously, this is not the way that we want it to be, but it is what it is for now. And before we dive into tonight's message, week 4 of the big picture, I just have a couple of quick announcements for us. And the first announcement is this. If you're connected at all, and if you are on Instagram or on YouTube or on Facebook or, don't live under a rock, then you probably have heard that camp has been canceled for this year. And that's just something that I don't have any choice in the matter at all. I didn't get to choose, and I decided I'm going to be a stinker and I'm going to cancel a camp. It was the camp's decision and the board's decision. They decided that the best thing to keep us and the camp safe for this year is to cancel all programming. So we're not going to be having camp this year, and I'm really, really bummed about that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to be doing stuff together over the summer, so you'll be needing to pay attention to the emails that I send out every single week, as well as to our Facebook and our YouTube, not YouTube, our Facebook and our Instagram pages, specifically the middle school ones, Embassy MS, to see and know what's going on with the middle schoolers that you guys can participate in. And we're looking forward to the day that we can see you guys again face to face, which I think and hope is coming sooner rather than later. Don't forget that if you're on with us here live in the premiere party, to on one of the sides of the screen here, I don't know which one, because it's reversed, but on one of the sides of the screen is our live chat window, so make sure that you say hey to us there and let us know that you're there. Tell us what's going on, what you've been doing this week, that kind of stuff. I'm going to toss it over here to the bumper video for just a second, and then we'll continue on with week number 4 of the big picture. All right, ready? Here's the toss. 1, 2, 3. And a catch. So we're back in week 4 of that's the high school series. What to do when you don't know what to do. That's the high school series. But I'm not going to cut it out. I'm going to just keep rolling on. Week number 4 of the big picture. And in week number 4 of the big picture, if you remember in this series, we've been talking about the life of Joseph and how things didn't really go super great for Joseph. Like they didn't really necessarily seem to add up or anything like that. And with that, one of the things that we've been talking about is that there's always a bigger picture in play. And that's what we're going to continue with this week as well. We're going to talk more about Joseph later on, and if you've forgotten over this week or if you've missed the past couple of weeks, the first thing that you should do is push pause here and go watch the past couple of videos from the past couple of weeks. But if you don't want to do that, if you choose not to, I'll give you a little bit, of an update on Joseph here in just a minute. But let me just tell you, Joseph's story is absolutely crazy. He found himself in the middle of some pretty unbelievable and difficult and even scary circumstances. And while we all have the privilege of knowing that Joseph's story ends up being amazing. When Joseph was in the middle of the story, I don't think that he necessarily thought, this is going to make a great story. And maybe that's kind of how we are, too, even with the situation that we find ourselves in right now. We may be thinking to ourselves, hey, this doesn't seem like it's the makings of a very great story right now. Joseph certainly didn't see the picture, the bigger picture, and all he could do was see what was happening in front of him right then and there. And now I have to wonder if being in the middle of all of those crazy and painful circumstances made Joseph ask the question that I think a lot of us ask when we find ourselves in similar situation, right? Maybe you've asked yourself this question: what's the point? Right? I mean, honestly, haven't we all been there? You go through a situation in your life that you don't understand, and you find yourself in a circumstance that you don't want to be in. You're disappointed with the way that your life looks, and you think, what is the point of all of this? Why do I have to go through this? Why does it have to be this way? There's my cat. So, yep, there she was. I told you, this is raw. This is uncut. My cat's going to walk right in front of the camera. It's just a thing that happens. There's been lots of situations in my life, guys, where in the middle of the situation, the story, the event, whatever it is, I found myself asking, man, what is the point of all of this? And it's not until you get a little bit further down the road that you're able to look back and say, oh, the point of that was to get to here. And guys, I'll be honest, there are situations, there's a glare, sorry. There are situations in my life where even now I don't know what the point is or was for that situation at all. And maybe it will reveal itself and maybe it won't. See, one thing that I've learned, guys, over the years, something that a very, very wise friend of mine told me, is that suffering is the norm in life, not the exception. And basically what that means is that, like, we shouldn't be surprised when things don't go our way, because that's how life is. Like, things always... Sorry, my cat is, like, tripping out right now. Anyway, things don't always add up. They don't always go the way that we thought that they would, and lots of the times that's the cause of the brokenness in our world. And that's the norm. Like, that's just how things are. If you think or expect that your life's going to be perfect and without any kind of heartache or trouble, well, you're in for a rough life, because that's just how life is, and that's okay, because always there's a bigger picture in play. And maybe you've had experiences like that in yourself, or maybe you haven't, but a lot of you have probably felt this way too. Maybe for you, it was at school, right? You've thought, why do I need to learn about things like the French Revolution or the periodic table of elements or even long division? When am I ever going to need this in my life? What's the point? And Bailey, don't be mad, because Bailey's a math teacher, but like, you don't use long division very much unless you like are a math teacher or you're doing like really mathy type things. But most of the people that I know, they don't use long division very much in their day-to-day lives. Sorry, Bailey, for that. You can be mad at me later if you want to, or you can text me and complain about my sermon afterwards, if that's what you want to do. Maybe you feel that way at school. Maybe some of you feel that way at home. Your parents make you do chores or hang out with your little siblings, or wake up early on a Saturday morning, and you absolutely don't understand why. So every time you're picking up clothes off the floor, or you're taking your baby sister outside to play, or being forced to get up early on the weekend, you think to yourself, man, what is the point? Maybe you've asked that question when you find yourself dealing with disappointment. You didn't make the team, or you got ghosted by a friend, or got gossiped about at school. And you just don't understand why you had to deal with that pain or disappointment. And you couldn't see the bigger picture, the point of the situation. Maybe it was something like really and truly painful. Maybe you've watched a loved one struggle with an illness. Maybe they even passed away. Maybe you had to deal with things like anxiety or depression. And no matter what you do, you can't seem to shake those feelings. Maybe your parents are going through a divorce right now, or you've been placed in foster care, or someone close to you has hurt you in a way that you don't know how you're going to come back from. those things certainly make you wonder, what is the point of all of this? Maybe you even feel this way about your faith. You come to church, you open the Bible from time to time, and you say prayers here and there, but nothing really feels any different about your life. You keep trying to connect with God, but nothing seems to be happening. And so you're left wondering, what is the point? And the truth is, we all will experience difficult things throughout our lives. And when we are in the middle of those difficult situations, often we ask the same question: what is the point? We don't necessarily see any good in the situation, or we don't experience the outcome that we would hope for, and we don't see any part of the big picture at all. All we see is our pain. And when we feel that way, it's nearly impossible to believe that anything good could come from it, isn't it? Well, that's going to bring us right back to Joseph, right? His life is recorded in a portion of the Bible called the Old Testament. It happened hundreds and even thousands of years before Jesus was born. It's the first half of the Bible, or really the first 3/4 of the Bible, if you want to get technical. And remember how Joseph found himself in a lot of really difficult and painful and frustrating circumstances. He was the second youngest of 12 brothers, right? And so he had a lot of brothers who didn't like him very much because his dad told them and him that Joseph was the favorite, and there's nothing that any of you guys can do about it. And Joseph, rather than being humble about it, kind of bragged about it. He kind of told them and reminded them that, hey, I'm the favorite, don't forget that. And that became kind of a problem for the brothers, so much so that one day they decided, well, we'll kill him, right? But instead of killing him, one of the brothers convinced him, hey, let's just throw him in a well and we'll sell him. We'll just sell him and make money off of him. So there were some traders, there's some slave traders that came from Egypt, and they bought Joseph, and they took him to Egypt, where he was sold as a slave into the house of a man named Potiphar. Potiphar, Jake, his name was Potiphar, not Potiphar, Potiphar. His name was Potiphar. And Joseph worked for this guy, which really turned out to be a pretty good situation for Joseph for the most part. He was promoted to basically being the head of the household. And that situation was really, really good for a while, until Potiphar's wife decided that she had a crush on Joseph, and she wanted to do something about that crush, you know what I mean? And so she tried to seduce Joseph. And Joseph was a really upstanding guy. He fell for none of the seduction from Potiphar's wife, and so she got frustrated, and she actually flipped the story and said that Joseph tried to seduce her, to do inappropriate things with her. And so Joseph was thrown in jail for something that he didn't commit. Can you imagine how Joseph must have been feeling, going from the well to being a slave to being actually highly ranked in his boss's house to back in prison? God, you have got to be kidding me, right? Are you kidding me, God? Things couldn't get any worse for me, Joseph. Could they? How long is this terrible time going to last? And really, God, what's the point of all of this anyway? And I think that those are really fair questions to ask God. Joseph had tried so hard to do the right thing and remain faithful to God. And where had it gotten him? In prison. That's where it got him. If I were Joseph, I'd definitely have a hard time seeing the bigger picture. Thankfully, God always has the bigger picture in mind. What Joseph couldn't see as he sat in prison was that God was working behind the scenes to help him. God was working for good, even in Joseph's pain. Joseph just couldn't see it yet. You see, while Joseph was in prison, he wasn't alone. There were two important guys in Pharaoh's household, his cupbearer and his baker. And both had been thrown in prison with Joseph for just a little while. And you could probably guess what the role of a baker is, but do we really know what a cupbearer is? Anybody know what a cupbearer is? I'm going to pretend that you don't for a second. I'm going to tell you that a cupbearer was somebody who was actually really important in the ancient world. See, one of the ways that people liked to kill kings was by poisoning them. And so the cupbearer's job was to take a sip of every single drink that the king ever had, so that he could determine whether or not the drink was poisoned. It's kind of a dangerous job, right? Because if it is, it's like, done, right? You die. And then you have to find a new cupbearer. But this cupbearer had hit a stroke of luck in that he hadn't died yet from being poisoned, and therefore he's really trusted by the king of Egypt, Pharaoh. Except that he had done something, and we don't know what, that got him thrown into prison. So Joseph is in prison with the cupbearer and the baker. And what Joseph didn't know yet is that these two guys, Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker, they were going to play a really, really big role in Joseph's story. Take a look at what happened. The text says, while they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker each had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed that they both looked upset. Why do you look so worried today? He asked them, and they replied, we both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean. And at first glance, this doesn't seem like a very remarkable story, right? Two guys had a couple of weird dreams, and that's not that important, right? Wrong. It's really important. You see, at that time, dreams were believed to be predictions about what might actually happen in the future. So often when people had weird dreams, they would seek out dream interpreters to tell them, hey, what does this dream mean? And that would give them, they believed, insight into what was going to happen in the future. And well, Joseph knew that he couldn't necessarily tell them what the dream meant, but that God could. So he told the cupbearer and the baker just that. Then Joseph listened to their dreams and interpreted them as God showed him what the dreams meant. Now Joseph told the cupbearer that his dream meant that Pharaoh was going to restore him to his position in 3 days. That's pretty good news, right? Great news, in fact. Then Joseph predicted that the baker's dream from the night before meant that in 3 days, the Pharaoh was going to kill him. The baker, right? Just execute him. Not so great news, right? I'd much rather be the cupbearer than the baker in this scenario, right? Wouldn't you? Either way, after Joseph helped these two guys understand their dreams, he had just one request from the cupbearer. He said, when you get out of here, when you're back in your position with Pharaoh, please don't forget about me. Tell Pharaoh who I am and what I did for you, that I am in prison unjustly and that I interpreted a dream that and rightly interpreted the dream, right? Help me get out of prison. That's what Joseph wants from these guys. And well, take a look at what happened next. Pharaoh's birthday came 3 days later. Happy birthday, Pharaoh. And he prepared a banquet for all of his officials and staff. He summoned the chief cupbearer and the chief baker out of prison to join the other officials. He then restored the chief cupbearer to his former position so that he could again hand Pharaoh his cup. But Pharaoh impaled the chief baker. That means stabbed him. Just stabbed him at the party, just as Joseph has predicted when he interpreted his dream. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, and this is the important part, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. So I think that there's two things that we can take away from this passage. First, that everything that God told Joseph would happen, happened. Sorry, baker. Rest in peace, bro. And second, that even after all of that, Joseph was forgotten, right? The cupbearer didn't keep his word. And so Joseph remained in prison. Sorry, I was shaking my head because Samantha tried to play music over there, and it was a bad idea. She started playing music right in the middle. So if you heard music, that's why. It's Samantha's fault. Anyway, can you imagine how hopeless Joseph must be feeling at this point, right? He probably thought that this was his last ticket out, his last chance to be released from prison. And we can only assume that again, he finds himself asking, God, what is the point of all of this pain and suffering? Is nothing going to change in my life? And for a while, that probably seemed true, right? Because as the Bible tells us, it took 2 full years for the cupbearer to finally remember Joseph. Joseph didn't know what all was happening or all that God was doing in those 2 years. He couldn't see the bigger picture. And can you really blame Joseph for feeling down about his situation? Can you blame him for not paying attention to the bigger picture that God was creating? He was in prison for 2 whole years, right? That's an incredibly long time to be wondering, what in the world is God up to? Think about it this way. Does anybody remember when flossing was like the biggest thing, the biggest dance move, right? It was all the craze. And anytime you put a camera on any kid at any sporting event or with a cell phone or anything like that, they would just automatically start like... Everybody was flossing all the time, right? And now we look at that and we're like, that's cute, right? 2 years, right? It was only 2 years ago that flossing was like the thing. And maybe some of you still floss, and that's okay. You should floss your teeth every day, but you probably shouldn't floss dance any day at all. And if you do, it's okay. It's fine, whatever. But don't. That was 2 years ago when that came out, right? And everyone was going crazy about it, but now, not so much. Can you imagine like being in prison for that long? Like knowing the trends when you went in and then coming out and still thinking that they were popular, and they're not anymore, right? They're not. Can you imagine being in prison for that long, feeling alone and forgotten? That's the situation that Joseph's in, right? But 2 years later, Pharaoh has himself a dream that no one can interpret. He brings all of his guys in and all of his wise dudes, and they're like, hey, I don't know what your dream means, Pharaoh. Sorry about that. And then the cupbearer remembers the guy he met in prison who had interpreted his dream 2 years ago. And just like that, things turned around for Joseph. He got his chance. Pharaoh called him to interpret his own dreams, and God helped Joseph to do just that. Take a look at what happens after that. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or as wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court and all of my people and take orders, and all of my people will take orders from you. Only I, Pharaoh, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Finally, guys, after all of the struggle and all of the suffering, after slavery and imprisonment and abandonment, Joseph finally got the good news that seemed like it would change his life for the better. And it's about time, right? But here's the thing. This isn't about Joseph finally getting the good news. This isn't about the happy ending or the nice promotion that Joseph got. That's part of the bigger picture. But what Joseph didn't realize during the time of his being in prison was that God was writing a bigger story. Joseph didn't see that when he was right in the middle of a painful and difficult circumstance. He was positioned to do something great that only he could do. Joseph's story was painful and it was filled with problems, but through those problems, God was creating a better future for Joseph. Joseph just had to be willing to trust that God could use him right where he was. And even during Joseph's pain and problems, God was working behind the scene for Joseph's good. And I think that the same can be true for you. We may never understand why we're dealing with the things that we're dealing with, or why we're facing our circumstances. But we can trust that just like God was there for Joseph, there's a bigger picture for us. And while creating our bigger picture, God is working for our good. And it may not always look the way that we think. It certainly didn't for Joseph, and we may never actually figure out why we had to go through the tough times that we went through. But when we trust God right where we are, we can trust that He is working towards what is best for us, even when we can't see it or don't understand it. In other words, when you can't see the bigger picture, trust that God is working for your good. So how do we do that? Maybe instead of struggling to find the point in our pain, how do we trust that God is working for our good? I think that we can start with these steps, guys. The first thing that we can do is exercise faith on a daily basis. And let's be honest, probably even like on an hourly basis. Choose to believe and trust that God is good and that He has everything in His control. In those moments, Luna knows, in the moments when you don't feel like you believe or when the pain is too much, say something like this over and over and over again until you start to believe it. God, you are good no matter what, and you have everything under your control. The second thing we can do is look for the good, right? While you're in your difficult situation, it's normal to want to rush past the problem. I do that all the time, guys. Whenever I am like facing a difficult situation, I just want to be through that situation and on to the next thing, right? Like this whole buying a truck process that I've been in for 3 weeks now, it's just like all I could think about is I just wanted to have the right truck and have the deal done and be done, right? Praise God, finally on Wednesday I got to go and pick up my truck and it's great, but it took me a long time to get there and it was a lot of like thinking about trucks. But when you're in difficult situations, it's natural, normal to want to rush past those. Here's Emma again. She's saying hello. She's gonna walk by real quick. That's okay. Welcome back. Sometimes when you pause and take a step back, you can learn something about yourself and about others. Sometimes you can grow in the process. And while you won't always see the ways in which God is working for your good, you can still make a choice to look for it. And you can look back on the times when God worked in your good in the past, even when you didn't realize it at the time. So the first thing is exercise faith. And the second thing is look for the good. And the third thing that you can do, friends, is to seek encouragement. When you lose sight of the truth that God is working for your good, lean into someone else. Ask them to tell you a story of what God was working for their good, of how and when God was working for their good, even when they couldn't see the bigger picture. Use their experiences to encourage you during difficult times. And that's exactly why we're here, guys. That's exactly why we do these YouTube premiere parties and why we are like FaceTiming you guys and chatting you guys, and that's why we have small groups when we all get to meet together, is because it's really, really important for us to have relationships with people who are going through and have gone through similar things to us, so that whenever you guys are struggling, you can come to Jake and I, or to Aubrey and Bailey and Madison, or John, and be like, hey, this is really difficult for me right now. How did you guys handle this? And we get to tell you about all the cool ways that God helped us through our difficult times and helped us to eventually, hopefully, see the bigger picture. So remember, when you can't see the bigger picture, trust that God is working for your good. And as we wrap up tonight, I want to ask you one question to think about. What is one situation in my life right now that I don't understand the point of? Maybe what you can do is you can message one of us, Jake or me or Aubrey or Madison or Bailey or John, and say, help me see what maybe I'm not seeing here. We would love to do that for you guys. That's exactly what we're here for. We're going to wrap up our series called The Big Picture next week with the dramatic conclusion to Joseph's story, and I'm really, really excited for that. And Jake's gonna lead us in that next week. It's gonna be great. If you guys have anything over this week that you need prayer for or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to us. Come here, Luna. Come on. Me and Luna love you. Luna probably doesn't because she doesn't know you, but if she knew you, she would love you because look at this little love. I hope that you guys have a great week, and hopefully you have a pup to snuggle with like me and Luna. Until I get to see you guys again face to face, and until we see you on YouTube next week, we love you and have a great week. Talk to you guys soon.